Hi, welcome to episode 396 of The Corner of Knit and Tea. My name is Laura. I'm also known as Fluffy Kira on Instagram and Twitter. I have a blog over at thecornerofknitandtea.com, which is where this episode and every episode show notes live. I have an Etsy shop called The Corner of Tea where I sell my handspun yarns and knitting patterns. Hi, how are you? It is Monday, October 23rd. We are almost done with October, although I guess there's still one more Monday left. It is a cold and rainy day here in just outside of Kansas City. I live on the Kansas side and it is a glorious fall day. I am staying inside all comfy and cozy and obviously working, but getting to watch out the window. It has been raining steadily all day and we had a lot of wind last night and the trees have, all the leaves have changed, and so we've got beautiful fall colors in our front yard. And it is kind of dreary, but it's kind of the perfect fall day. So I hope that you are doing well. I have some crafting to show you, not as much as I had hoped for. The week always goes by really quickly, and then I have to think about what I might have to show you. So I do have a few things. Actually, I have two small finished objects, and then I have another project that I did cast on and get partway through. So I have a few things to share with you this week. I hope that you are doing well. So let's jump right in. Today I am drinking Harney & Sons Heirloom Bartlett Pear. It is a fall kind of feeling tea. I thought about getting something pumpkin today, but decided I wanted pear. This is a white tea that has pear pieces, apple pieces, cinnamon chips, white cornflowers, and peach in it. And so it is a lovely tea from Harney & Sons, which is made in New York, but I do love their teas. And it is just a nice fall blend, and I'm drinking it, of course, in my Hello Kitty mug. You'll only have to see this one more time this year, but I do love using it in October because it's the only time I really think about using it. I know I could use it year-round, but I just sort of pull it out for the weeks around October. So it's just my really cute Hello Kitty trick-or-treat mug. So, I hope that you're doing well. I got lots done this week. Of course, there could always be more, but let's talk about it. So the first thing that I finished, you saw last week, and I think I only had about half the foot to go, and that is a pair of socks for my niece, Miss Roxy. She is turning 9 this coming week, and these are actually for, not for her birthday, they are for the holidays, but I do try and get started early because otherwise I just find myself running in last minute mode all the way through. So these are kind of just a standard sock. It is a 52 stitch sock on US zeros. And then it is a slip stitch, heel flap, and gusset, and then a rounded toe, and I just did a little bit of 2x2 rib at the top. The yarn itself is from Little Yellow Uke, who used to have a podcast and dye yarn, and it is called Somewhere, and it is just these really great, I mean, it's soft colors. I used part of it for a baby hat because it's definitely baby colors, but it's not all soft pastels. I mean, the yellows and greens and blues are pretty bright. It's just the pink and the lavender that are kind of pale. Anyway, so I have a pair of finished socks for her. That means I need to work on a pair for my nephew. I did not cast those on this week. But I do have the yarn wound and ready to go. I think I needed to wind it when I showed it to you last time. And Monday evening I did lots of yarn winding, so I am ready to go for a bunch of my next cast-ons. I just have not gotten there yet. So that is one pair done. I only have one pair left, I think, before I call it quits for the kids this year. And actually, I'm not doing much knitting as holiday gifts. I have to decide if I'm going to do a collection of hats to go to my other niece and nephew on my husband's side. And if I do, I have 4 or 5 hats there, but I'm going to do them in worsted or fingering held doubled, so they'll go pretty fast. So I just need to kind of make that decision and then get started. That might be part of my November project, although I will also have Nanny Swaymo, and I'm sure I will have other samples and things to be working on. So, but I am still glad that for the most part, I think my holiday list is mostly done. So I will do that other pair maybe for Miles. I should cast that on this week. So I sort of did what I always do when I have a lot to do and I don't know exactly what to do, which is I knit a hat. Most of you know that this is kind of my, oh, if I don't know what's going on or I have way too much to do and I can't decide what's next and what am I going to do, I just go ahead and knit a hat. And I do this out of leftover yarns that I have in my stash. So I will talk about the new sample in just a minute, but when I started the new sample, I had some questions about it partway through and where the colors should go and some of those kinds of things. And so I sent some questions off to the dyer and then had a free evening where I had thought I was going to be working on the shawl, but I was not working on the shawl. So I had a skein of, it was bulky weight Cloudborne, 100% Highland wool. I had bought it from either Craftsy before it was Blueprint or Blueprint before they went back to Craftsy. So it's been in the stash for quite a few years. Basically, it was one leftover skein from a kit that I used to knit a sweater. And I just had one skein left over when I was done. And so I just stuck it in the stash. Technically, it was marked as a bulky weight, although I feel like it is a heavy worsted weight. And it was about 220 yards. So I went ahead and knit a hat this week. So I originally pulled a cabled hat pattern to do, and it was a cabled hat pattern where the cables weren't, there were repeats, but it was like in and out and in and out, and they intersected with each other, and so it was like some cross and stuff, and I started to knit it while I was on a knit night with friends, and realized that I just could not concentrate on the chart, and that I kept repeatedly screwing it up. So I defaulted back to what I normally do when I just don't know what else to do, or I just can't concentrate on a pattern, and I just kind of did a broken rib. So this basically started as a knit 2 purl 2, and then what I did was I knit a few rounds in between each section, and that created a little bit of a waffle or a broken rib. I think this makes a really nice squishy hat pattern. It's something that looks sort of geometric and also very unisex, so I think it can be for for girls or guys or whoever. If you don't identify as either, that's fine too. I just feel like it's a really good kind of neutral pattern when you don't know who the hat is going to be for. And so I went ahead and knit that up, and honestly, I couldn't really tell you. I don't remember how many stitches I cast on. I just did a knit 2 purl 2 rib for a while, and then I went till I hit about, I would say, 6 or 8 inches, and then I did a fairly quick decrease to the top, and it made the top look just a little odd, so I went ahead and put a big pom-pom on there. So I think this is just the perfect hat for someone who needs a hat. Like I said, it is 100% Highland wool. It's not super scratchy, but it's not super soft either, and it is not machine washable. So I will probably keep it and donate it to the campaign Wool Aid that looks for 100% or as close to 100% wool products as they can, just because there are so many wonderful properties to wool. It is, it is water resistant. It is warm when it's cold out, cool when it's warm out. It wicks away moisture. What was the other thing that I was going to say? It doesn't really, because it kind of repels water a little bit, it doesn't really absorb odors and moisture, so it stays clean smelling for longer. Now, that's not to say that if you drag it through the mud, or if you sweat in it every day for a whole year, it's not going to smell and it's not going to need to be washed. But in general, compared to a lot of the synthetic fibers, which do sometimes retain smells, it tends to be a little bit less odor prone. It's a little more odor resistant, and so I think all of those wonderful properties of wool make it great for donations, and great for folks who may not have access to washing facilities as often as they would like. So yeah, I have just a little bit of this skein left over, and I have a whole bunch of other scraps of yarn that are 100% wool, so I'm gonna be doing more hats. I also am taking into consideration what I talked about a couple weeks ago, which is knitting socks for folks in need, and I actually already purchased a little bit of yarn to start on a project for that, and I will share that shortly. But I do think I just like having a hat going. They're so quick. They're like candy. They're just, I knit this in 2 nights and I was done. So anyway, that is kind of not a lot to say about it, but a little bit to say about it. And like I said, I think it was a Cloudborne bulky, and I used almost the full skein. So yeah, that's what I've got. And there wasn't a pattern. I sort of made it up as I went along. So those are the finished objects for this week. I have one work in progress that I want to share with you. So I actually shared these colors with you a couple weeks ago, and I talked about the shawl that I was going to knit, but I didn't really bring anything to show you. So the shawl that I am knitting is called Snow Mantra, and it's by Svetlana Gordon, and I don't have a great picture of it, but that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea. It is a triangular shawl, and it has lots and lots of short row shaping to create all those squiggles, and then there is I-cord in there that also helps create those squiggles. So I started working on this pattern this week. It is a little bit slow going because it is a bit finicky in terms of you are adding stitches, you are picking up stitches, you are doing an I-cord, which is kind of almost like a bind off, and then you have to pick up again. And so I have the first little bit of this shawl completed. The shawl in itself has 20 sections, and I've finished section 5. So and of course I am not anywhere a fifth of the way through the knitting because it will get bigger and bigger as it goes on. But this is what I have so far. So like I said, this is short rows. It's a lot of shaping in terms of casting on a whole bunch of stitches, binding off or knitting stitches together. So you have all this interesting shaping in there. And then in between each section is an I-cord that kind of emphasizes all that wiggly shaping that you've created. There's also kind of a row where you're short rowing and using kind of both colors, and it moves in and out and gives a little bit of extra interest. So that is what I am doing so far. I will say that by the time I made it through the 5th section, I feel like I kind of have a handle on what this pattern is doing. Each section is very similar in the sense that it makes use of the same increases, the same decreases. It's got 4 or 5 rows of patterning, and then you're doing your I-cord. So it's definitely repetitive enough that once you figure out how the first few sections work, it's great. I will say the first couple sections are super fiddly because you're doing a lot of creating stitches and you're kind of creating this little shape in here, and that is really fiddly to work with. But once you actually get it created, it's really just not that hard because, again, like I said, it's the same 3 or 4 methods just over and over and over again. So I am enjoying that, especially now that I've sort of gotten through the first section and I'm a little more comfortable with it. The colors I am using so far, well, okay, let's talk about a couple things. As I said, I am knitting this for Zen Yarn Garden, and I am using, oh, here's my Cloudborn tag. I was looking for that. I am using Zen Yarn Garden, which is right here, and I am using 2 of their put-ups. The first put-up that I am using, let's see if the other card is in here because there was a second card. Yeah, here it is. The first I am using is their Serenity Silk Plus, which is a 75% superwash merino, 15% cashmere, 10% silk, and that's 500 yards to 100 grams. So it is a very light fingering weight bordering on a lace weight, and I am using that at least right now in the natural colorway. So this is undyed. I will also, as I continue through the project, be using it sometimes in this nice bubblegum pink colorway. So, and then what I am going to be working through the shawl, and the shawl will take more of this on as I continue working, I will be working in adding in their Luxe Gradient Blank, and, or I should say Luxe Blank and Cakes, and these are also the Serenity Silk Plus base, so it's the same base. They are just dyed in gradient, and the blanks or cakes, they are dyed in blanks, but then sometimes they also wind them up into cakes. I'm just using this one still as a blank. It is 150 grams and 750 yards, so you really have a substantial amount to work with. So that is what I'm using. That's the colored one, and I thought this was the Woodland Gradient, but I'm not sure that it is. To be honest, I'm not sure I know what gradient this is, and it could potentially be a new one that they are planning to bring out with this shawl. But basically it moves from like dark emerald greens and tealy greens into kind of brighter grassy greens. Then we go into some browns, and then there are some highlights of a little bit bit of pink in here, which I think is why she picked the pink, because it will pull that in. You get into some pink sections and then it's going to fade back out the same way it faded in. And I am just going to keep going on this blank until I finish the shawl. And I don't know how far I'll get through it. I should get through a significant amount of it, but probably not all of it, if I had to guess. But I don't know, because I do know as we create more short row and shaping and winding and curly cues and everything, that does tend to use up a lot of yarn. So, and I really do not have a sense, because the beginning sections are fairly tiny, I do not have a real good sense of how much it's really going to take. But my hope is that we will get most of the way through the gradient, because part of the reason to use gradients in a project like this is because you'll get to see the full color repeat throughout the shawl and how it interacts with both the white and the pink. So that is the project that I'm working on. Again, the shawl is Snow Mantra by Svetlana Gordon. I am using the needle size called for, because the needle size called for is, I believe, she used a 3.0 millimeter, which, so that's kind of one of those in-between sizes. Because technically a US 2 is a 2.75 millimeter, and technically a US 3 is a 3.25 millimeter, and oddly enough, Addie, which is usually the needle, my needle of choice, in Addie's only, their US 2 is a 3.0 millimeter, which is not how it is in any other needle brand, and I don't really understand precisely why that is. The pattern called for a 3 millimeter, so I went ahead and grabbed a 3 millimeter. Normally I do drop a size or two when I knit projects, and that's because of my gauge, not because of anything that's with the pattern designer. But I decided that I really didn't want to go smaller than something between a US 2 and a US 3, because I thought that would just be too tight. And since the yarn that I'm using is a little bit on the light fingering, heavy lace weight side, I really didn't want to make it any smaller. I mean, I do want this to be a substantially sized shawl, and I'm kind of trying to do the mental gymnastics to get from 5 to as many rows as are in the pattern. I could potentially extend it beyond there if I wanted to make it bigger, although since it is not written, I would sort of have to figure out what I wanted to do in terms of her increases and decreases. So I probably will have a handle on that when I get there, but of course that wouldn't necessarily be intuitive for other folks. And one of the things that I try to do when I knit samples is basically knit it per pattern, so that anyone else trying to recreate it can recreate it exactly as I have and exactly as the pattern has. So that is what I'm working on now. Hopefully I will double in size by the next time I speak to you, if not a little more, I can hope, right? And so I did have a slight pause in this week while I waited a day or two to sort of figure out, I had some ideas about how the colors should work together, and when I put them together, not in this version, when I put them together in a previous version, I did the first section or two and I really didn't like the way it was looking, and so I sort of went back to the dyer and said, how do you think we should do this? Because she's kind of the master of putting the colors together. So I think I should have more time to work on that this week and get more done, and hopefully I will dive into some socks and not get distracted by another hat. And I will say, just for reference, because I was looking for this tag and I couldn't figure out where it had went, this is Cloudborn Fibers Wool Bulky Twist in Slate Heather, and it was 228 yards to 4.5 ounces, 125 grams. So that is what I was using. Like I said, it's probably between a bulky and a yeah, it recommends 3 3/4 to 4 stitches on a US 10.5. So I guess that is a bulky, but I knit it up more at a worsted weight, and I like it because it's dense in the hat. So that's what I was using there. So that is the content of my knitting needles this week. I don't have a lot more to show you. I do have a little bit of spinning content, and finally something fun. So I finished the singles for my spin, and this was a braid of 100% superwash merino from Gritty Knits, and I bought it here at Plyaway. Was it Plyaway? Yes, at Plyaway this past year, which was already several months ago. It was in April. And I wanted to get that worked up because it was just bright and cheerful, and you can see it is reds and oranges and pinks and blues and a little bit of purple where they all overlap. And I got both bits. This is the braid divided in half. I spun this as a fractal, so I think it was this one I spun in lots of little bits and pieces, thin vertical segments, and then I think this one was the one, because it just looks like it, I think this one was the one that I spun kind of straight through. I divided the braid in half. Basically, the way the dyer dyed the braid, each half was the same. So when I folded it in half, all the colors lined up. When I unbraided it and I laid it out on the floor and I folded it in half, kind of lengthwise, all the colors lined up. So what I did was I broke it in half, so I had two shorter pieces, and then one of those pieces I broke into 4 or 5 strips and I spun it in thin strips, and the other one I spun straight through so that it is kind of a semi-fractal spin. So basically one of them will move through the color progressions much more slowly than the other half, and that will create some interesting striping. I think that is kind of my new favorite way to spin. I used to divide both halves into tiny strips and then apply them together. And I'll tell you why I didn't do that here. I didn't do that here for 2 reasons. First of all, I did not want the colors to get super, super muddy. And my feeling was that if I divided both halves in half and did small bits of color, the whole braid was going to end up almost, I feel like, 1 ply of blue and 1 ply of pink. And then you weren't going to get any of the pronounced colors that I saw in the braid itself. So like when I apply these together, we will have sections where red touch red and orange touches orange and blue touches blue, in addition to sections where those things overlap and create kind of new secondary colors. So that was part of it. The second half is that I tend not to spin each half in small strips if the halves are even, because then sometimes, well, okay, I could do that if I wanted to do a 2-ply that almost echoed the braid as it was. If I thought that I could spin all of that in exactly the same, like I could potentially make a striping yarn out of it, except that I don't think I could spin both halves equally if I did it that way. So basically I wanted to spin each half slightly differently so that I'd get more pronounced characteristics in the finished product. I don't know if that makes sense, but my concern was that I didn't want to muddy things up. I did want to keep some of these intense colors as intense colors, and my hope is that somewhere in this pink, red, orange section, it will overlap with little bits of pink, red, orange on this bobbin, so you'll still be able to see those colors in the finished yarn. Regardless, this yarn is going to be super fun, and it is 100% superwash merino, so it would be great for socks if that's something you have in mind. Hopefully I will get good yardage on it. I couldn't tell you yet because I haven't plied it up yet. My guess is it will probably be somewhere between a sport and DK, so it would be kind of thicker socks. My guess is I did not get fingering just based on the amount of time it took me to spin it. So, my plan is to ply this up this week. I will have this to show you next week, and that means I need a new braid for this week. And I went ahead and kind of tossed the stash and pulled out a new braid. And it's kind of thematic in the week leading up to Halloween. I don't think this was why she named it this, but this is Tooth and Claw, which was the July 2022 Fiber Club, and it is a South American wool top, which means it's not going to be superwash. It is not super, super soft, but neither is it really, really rough. It's kind of, I would guess it's probably a short to medium stapled wool, meaning it's going to be somewhat on the softer side, but it also doesn't have a ton of crimp or poof, so I don't think it's going to be like super, super, super squishy. It's just going to be kind of in between. So these are the colors, and I think these are kind of nice fall colors, kind of plums and a little bit of gold and a little bit of navy in there, and Tooth and Claw just seem fitting for the week leading up to Halloween. So this is the one that I'm going to work on this week, and that one will also be going in my shop. So I am pleased to be back to spinning colored fiber and spinning something fun. I do have a couple projects waiting in the wings. I have a braid of fiber that I'm hoping to spin up to be my Christmas Eve cast on this year, so that will come in the next few weeks. And also I am revisiting something I spun earlier this year and figuring out if I want to change it for the project. I I was kind of spending a little time thinking about things that I have spun this year and projects that I had in mind for it, and why I haven't felt more compelled to work on hand-spun projects. And part of it is because in one of the cases, I think the hand-spun that I spun is a mismatch for the project, and I think something about it is not quite sitting right with me, and that is why I don't feel motivated to work on it. And I sort of had to sit and think this out and talk this out with a friend. But I think when I got to the end of it, what I came to was that the yarn that I spun for that particular purpose is not right for that particular purpose. So I think rather than try and force it into it, I'm going to pull it and save it for something later. And I have more fiber because I have plenty of yarn and fiber. If I didn't buy any more, I would be set for years and years to come. But I think I'm going to try spinning up a small sample of fiber and seeing if what I can sample will make me happier in my project. And if so, then I will bring it back and share it with you, and hopefully that will get me working on it again, because I would love to dive back into that project. I know I'm being kind of vague, but I don't want to talk all about it and then realize that I'm just not going to do it. So I'm going to go back and play a little bit at the wheel, and in a couple weeks I will share with you what I have progressed on or what I'm thinking about. So I hope that you are doing well. We have about a week left in the month. I will see you next Monday, October 31st, for a little Halloween. I don't have anything super special planned, although I have a costume picked out. It's not really a costume. But I am excited for that. And then that means November 1st, Tuesday, is Nanny Swaymo Cast On Day. So I'm getting very excited about that. It means you will have more projects to look at soon. I hope that you are feeling the crafting mojo and that you are enjoying your autumn, or if you're in other parts of the world, your spring. Oh, one more thing. I have gotten a couple notes on the podcast. A couple people have left comments that the sound has not been that great for the past few weeks. And that always frustrates me. Your comments don't frustrate me. The process frustrates me because I am not a very techie person, and it means that then I have to figure out what I did that I wasn't doing before, or, and stop doing it, or what I need to do. I have made a couple adjustments based on some troubleshooting things that I Googled. If you could let me know, if you were one of the people who was experiencing sound problems, if you could let me know if it's any better on this video, and also conversely if it's not, I would appreciate it, because I played with my settings just a little bit. And I'm hoping that it's going to be better, but I won't know unless someone tells me that. So if you would do that, I would be most appreciative. So I will call it a day here. I hope that you have a wonderful week ahead, and until I see you next time, I will say happy spinning, let's try again. Happy knitting, happy spinning, happy sipping, and I'll see you next time. Bye.